Without further ado, Mark Anthony.
Well, thank you very much for having me here tonight to talk to you. As you heard in my biography, my mother was a history teacher. What's not in there is the fact that when I was learning history as a lad, I went and talked to my great-grandparents, who were blessed to have known their great-grandparents, who were the children of my Revolutionary War ancestors. So I've actually heard stories that are literally third-hand. When I do this program in schools, I actually say, history, if it's taught wrong, it's boring. I mean, who did what to whom, when, where, how, why? That's not how I learned history. I listened to stories. The stories of the people who did the living and the dying, not the people who are the marble bust on the ledge in a museum. So that's what I want to do tonight. I want to tell you a story. The story of the American flag and the story of the American Revolution at the same time. Now the fun part is when I go to schools, I always ask, when did the American Revolution start? And unfortunately, some of the answers are 1900, 1861, 1941. A lot of us know that the story starts, could be argued, it actually starts in the 1760s with the end of the French and Indian War. That's not where I'm starting tonight. I hope you're in for a long haul, because we're going to start back in around the 1400s. See, then, the Scottish people are actually fighting for freedom. And their leader, like any good leader on the eve of battle, goes into his tent and prays. Now that night while he's sleeping, he has a vision. It's St. Andrew. And he says, tomorrow you will have victory, and I will give you a sign. Well, the Scottish leader gets up, goes out of his tent, and he looks into the sky, and it's a brilliant blue. Not a single cloud in the sky, except he looks, and there's two small clouds. And they start to grow. And as they grow into a cross. He takes that as a sign, and that day, the Scottish people win their battle and their independence. Now, to commemorate that vision and that sign, the Scottish people commission a flag. The cross of St. Andrew, their patron saint. And if you look closely enough, you might actually just see that cross in the sky. Now, the English, not to be outdone, decide to honor their patron saint with a flag. And this is the cross of St. George. In the 1600s, King James of Scotland becomes King James of England. One man sitting on two thrones and two flags. It's really not going to work, is it? So someone comes up with a really bright idea. Why don't we just put the two flags together to form a British flag? You see the cross of St. Andrew and the cross of St. George. Now, this is not the modern British flag, because there's one more cross that has to be added, but that's in 1803, and that's after our story. So we won't hear about St. Patrick tonight. After King James, you have Queen Anne. She really likes the military, and she commissions a flag for her navy. And this is that flag. It's called the British Red Ensign. Red for the color of the military, but yet you see the king's colors of King James. Now, just so you know, red stands for the military in British flags, blue stands for merchants. And quite surprisingly, the head admiral of the military, he gets a white flag just in case he needs to surrender. Now, I said earlier that the revolution could trace its roots to the French and Indian War because of the taxation that occurs afterwards to pay for the expense that Britain incurs over those 7 years. to send men and material across 3,000 miles of ocean. Now, the colonists know their law. If you are an English subject, to be taxed, you have to be represented in Parliament. The colonists are not represented, hence, no taxation without representation. They also know that all their colonies' charters are royal charters, and in those royal charters, it gives the power of taxation solely to the king, not Parliament. So they're protesting for their rights. And to show that they're unhappy, what better way than to deface a symbol of the group in power? People in Taunton, Massachusetts, take the British red ensign and add the words liberty and union. Now, it's important to see, what are they actually saying? Liberty, to them, does not mean independence. If they're going to talk about independence, they're going to use the word independency. Liberty means the exercise of your rights under the law. We want our rights. And we still desire union with the crown. We are loyal subjects. That's what they're saying. As we know, that protest doesn't go anywhere. Other groups start to protest. Most famously, there's a group in Boston that forms. And they throw a really great party in December 1773. These are the Sons of Liberty. They take red and white stripes to show their group. Now this one actually just happens to have 13. There are some that have less. There are some that are even vertical, not just horizontal. But if you saw red and white stripes, that was the Sons of Liberty. And as we know, in April of 1775, things finally come to a head. The British send out troops from Boston on the eve of April 18th to capture John Hancock and Sam Adams. Also to capture the supplies that the Minutemen had been storing in Lexington and Concord. Now that morning, as the British arrive in Lexington, they are faced with local militia, this being the Bedford militia's flag. Here you have the armored arm, which in heraldry signifies defiance, with the uplifted sword and the phrase, Vince aut more, victory or death. That's a pretty heady statement for untrained militia, the weekend warriors who trained maybe one Saturday a month, to be saying in front of the most well-trained and most equipped, best equipped army in the world at that time. Now that morning there is a shot. We don't know who fires. The British actually succeed in two of their goals. They do capture ammunition. They capture arms. They don't get Hancock or Adams. What's interesting is the history books say that the revolution starts that day in Massachusetts. That's not quite right. That same day, the British royal governor in Virginia seizes the gunpowder stored in the armory in Williamsburg. On the 19th, the next day, the royal governor of South Carolina sends troops to the magazine in Charlestown. They are unsuccessful in locating the powder. Literally within a 36-hour period, the revolution starts in the northern colonies, the middle colonies, and the southern colonies. Think about that. Well, the militia in Massachusetts is able to drive the British Army back into Boston. They send out word, send help. We have the British holed up. Rhode Island sends units. One unit contains a private who has a bum leg, who will feature later in our story. Units from Vermont, a disputed territory between New Hampshire and New York. arrive. Vermont, which translates to Green Mountains. Heard of Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys? They're from Vermont. Then you have fishermen who have their own flag. An appeal to heaven, from whence we know our victory shall come. And since they're fishermen, they logically put a tree. Okay. Maybe this next flag. At the Battle of Bunker Hill, which was fought shortly thereafter, according to Jonathan Trumbull, an artist, this flag flew. Okay, I understand the military, but of course I know Massachusetts, you know, they might have their fair share of tree huggers. All right, this next flag. Surely we can make an understanding out of this next flag. This also is flown at Bunker Hill. Now let's be logical. What have I told you before? You see the cross of St. George. England. These are Englishmen. Blue stands for merchants. How do they make money in New England? They are merchants. And any good merchant is going to advertise their number one product, lumber. Their number one export in New England is lumber to build English ships. Anytime you see a tree on a flag in the Revolutionary era, that's a New England flag. That tells you where they are from. Symbology is important. Now, other groups send help, and they actually remember a political cartoon drawn by Benjamin Franklin in the 1760s. Now, according to the John Adams miniseries on HBO, this was a flag. It wasn't. It's a political cartoon, but it helps us. Franklin shows a snake cut into pieces. He's advocating for what he calls his Confederation plan, where Americans would rule themselves subject to the king. Too bad the English Empire did not adopt this for another 100 years. But if you look, he starts at New England and winds up in South Carolina, going down the East Coast. This cartoon actually predates the formation of the colony of Georgia. The colonists in today's world are illiterate. They're not really learned, which is a falsehood. They knew how to read and write. They knew how to remember. So 10 years later, as groups are forming to send help to Boston, you have groups from Virginia, the Culpeper County Militia, with a coiled rattlesnake with the words, "Don't tread on me." They add the phrase liberty or death in honor of their greatest orator in the House of Burgesses, Patrick Henry. "I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." Not to be outdone, another gentleman in Culpeper, Virginia, who has a lot of naval interest, who was a member of the Sons of Liberty, designs a flag. Again, you have the snake and the phrase, "Don't tread on me." This flag was flown over the first ship of the U.S. Navy, and actually, in the early 2000s, was reauthorized to be flown by naval vessels in the War on Terror. This is the Naval Jack. Not to be outdone, Christopher Gadsden, possibly the richest man in South Carolina, designs a flag to fly on his 14 ships out of Charlestown. The Gadsden flag. Now, why in the world do we have so many snakes? It's not because of Benjamin Franklin. Franklin actually knew something. As explained by the London Messenger in December of 1775, when using an animal in heraldry, you take the best aspects of the animal to describe what you're trying to symbolize. The rattlesnake is found nowhere in North America. It has no eyelids, it is ever vigilant. It does not strike without first giving warning, and only then in defense of its home. Think about it. The rattlesnake's only in North America. What's in North America? The colonies. It has no eyelid, it is ever vigilant. Remember, the colonies had Minutemen. It does not strike without first giving warning. The colonists for years had sent petitions and ambassadors to Parliament and the King to no avail. And only then does it strike in defense of its home. The British march out of Boston. The British steal the powder in Virginia. The British try to steal the powder in Charlestown. They only defended their home. The snake is an excellent symbol for America. Much better than the turkey that Benjamin Franklin wanted as a national symbol. Now, I will ask you this. How many of you are native-born South Carolinians? Whew, okay. Then the rest of y'all, this is a new flag. You've never seen it before. But it is a proud flag. It has a perfect history in battle. It is the flag described in a letter from Benjamin Franklin to John Adams. It is the flag of the South Carolina Navy. Once again, you see the serpent. You see, don't tread on me. Now, when I say this has a perfect record, South Carolina's Navy, and most of all the colonies had their own navies. South Carolina had 7 proud ships. Well, maybe that's an exaggeration. They had 7 boats. They were fishing boats, but they were ours. And they heard that there was a British armada sailing south to attack Charlestown in June of 1776. And so they equipped these 7 boats, sent them out over the bar into the Atlantic Ocean, where 4 promptly sink. The other 3 skedaddle back into the harbor to safety, where they hide for the next 4 years until the British show back up. At which point the city's fathers send those 3 ships up both the Ashley and the Cooper River and sink them there to keep the British from navigating north. I told you it was a perfect record. Perfectly 0-7. I don't doubt that that flag doesn't get a lot of good publicity, because there was another flag at the same time that actually gets much better publicity. And that is a flag that flew over a 3-sided Palmetto log fort. This is the flag of William Moultrie and his men who defended Charlestown against the British armada that came in June 1776. Here, the blue is not so much for the merchants, but for the product that made South Carolina rich. Indigo. And we have the crescent moon. Only it's not a crescent moon. At that time, officers in the military would wear what's called a gorget, a piece of metal on their chest that signifies that they are officers. Now, Moultrie had inscribed the word liberty upon his. Now, the men knew that they could not wear gorgets, but they did remember heraldry. Heraldry is very important. They remember heraldry because if you take this gorget, turn it on its side, it is a single crescent moon. In heraldry, a single crescent moon is the symbol of the second son of a family. The early pioneers and settlers of South Carolina were, in fact, second sons because they could not inherit land or title in Europe because of the law of primogeniture. So in this case, Moultrie's men not only honor their commander, they also honor their ancestors. Now, George Washington has been given command of the Continental Army in Boston. I don't really have any fun stories or can tell you much about the symbology of this flag, but this is the flag of the Philadelphia Light Horse that escorts Washington to Boston. The interesting thing about this flag is that this blue and white striped field, if you look at the original flag that survives in Philadelphia to this day, you can actually see the king's colors fading through as the paint withers away. They actually painted blue and white stripes over the king's colors and kept the rest of the flag. Now Washington, now you see, I've shown you a lot of flags. I can talk about 300 more. I'm not that sadistic. But Washington, when he gets to the Continental Army in Boston, sees flags. There's not a single flag that unifies the whole group. He orders a flag to be made to symbolize this new Continental Army as it fights the British. Now he knows that some of his men are fighting for liberty, some are fighting for independency. He has to unify both groups. This is called the Grand Union flag. The stripes of the Sons of Liberty, but the king's colors. Well, as we know, Congress ends this debate. They pass and adopt the Declaration of Independence. We are now fighting for independence. Washington discards that flag and has this flag made to symbolize to his troops where he is at all times. It's called the Commander-in-Chief's flag. Blue, not for merchants, not for any product, but blue for the Continental Army coat. And one star for each of the independent states. In this case, we have 6-sided stars. They're easy to make. You should cut out some triangles, put one on top of the other. You got yourself a 6-sided star. If you want to be creative, you get 2 squares. Put one on top of the other. You can get an 8-point star. If you want extra credit, you get 3 squares. You can get 12 points. About a year later, Congress passes the resolution that describes and defines the American flag. June 14, 1777, that's why Flag Day is June 14th. Resolved that the flag of the United States shall consist of 13 stripes alternating red and white, with a field of blue upon which there are 13 stars arrayed as if a new constellation in the sky. That's our flag. So based on that definition, I give you the flag of the United States of America. Barry.
You caught me, man.
Okay, does this flag fit the definition?
Yes.
Yes.
It does.
Yeah.
Nowhere in that resolution does it say where the stripes have to be.
Right.
Nowhere does it say where the stars have to be, does it? Does it tell you that it needs to be 5 points? It actually is, in this case, 8 points. Yeah, this is the flag of the Easton Pennsylvania Militia. Okay, I see y'all aren't buying it. Okay, well, according to storybooks, the first flag that is our American flag was sung by a seamstress in Philadelphia who could fold her cloth in such a way that with one cut of her scissors, she can generate a perfect 5-point star. She sews a flag, and she proudly displays it to John Hancock, George Washington, and they were very proud of the effort. This is the flag of Betsy Ross, possibly the most famous flag from the American Revolution. The only problem is, it don't exist. This flag is not described in any document until July 4th of 1876, when Betsy Ross's grandson sells a story to a Philadelphia magazine in honor of the centennial of the American Revolution. The only reason we know that this is a falsehood, the day that he says George Washington is in Philadelphia, He's in fact in New York City planning its defense against the British Armada under William Howe. Gotta get your details right. But again, I like a good story. If this is a story that gets people interested, I'm gonna tell that story. The first flag that we know that comes close to that definition is actually sewn by the wife of General John Stark in Bennington, Vermont, as the British under Burgoyne are going south towards Saratoga. Now again, she goes white on red instead of red on white, but she does alternate stripes. She has 13 stars, and she's creative. She actually does 7 points. It's a square and triangle. But she arrays the stars as if they are a victory arch, like a Roman victory arch, and puts the number 76 underneath in honor of the year of America's independence. Now, at this point in time, we are roughly 1779. And surprisingly, we have reached halftime. If you look at the American Revolution, 1775 to 1779, basically everything is fought up north. Late 1779 through the end of the war, everything is fought in the South. But we can't have halftime without entertainment, can we? How many people know that there's actually battles of the American Revolution fought in the British Isles on British soil? Yeah. You see, on June 14, 1777, after Congress gets around to defining what the American flag looks like, it gets around to commissioning naval captains. One such captain is from Scotland, and once he gets his commission, he has a great idea. Why are we fighting here when we can fight there? So he sails to the British Isles, and his plan unfolds. I will raid my hometown. While I'm raiding the hometown, I will kidnap the Lord Mayor and hold him for ransom, and I will demand ransom of American independence. I didn't say it was a great plan, but it's a plan. So they get there, they go to his hometown, they raid the town, they get to the Lord Mayor's house, they break open the door, and no Lord Mayor, he's gone. Okay, let's think fast, think fast. Kidnap his wife. She ain't here. Hey, boss, you know we gotta get paid for this. And so Jones orders them to steal the silverware, which of course is silver. Now, according to the English press, this man is nothing more than a pirate. Okay, there's one comment, not the Revolutionary War flag, but it's just fun to put in because school kids love pirates. But yes, he is decried in the English press as a pirate. He sails to France, and the French, oh, magnifique, what a man. We need to give him stuff. Let's give him a new ship, which is 30 years old and can't sail. And this captain actually has a description of what the American flag is supposed to look like. He goes to a seamstress and gets a flag. Now, during the course of a battle in September of 1779, he comes across the British frigate Serapis off the east coast of England. They engage in a fight. During that fight, the flag is shot off of its pole. That's a sign of surrender. And the British captain, "Sir, have you struck?" And Captain John Paul Jones says, "I have not yet begun to fight." Hours later, he raises his flag over the British frigate Serapis. Yeah, something get lost in the translation, or the French seamstress thought that blue stripes would just look, je ne sais quoi. But yes, this is known as the Serapis flag. Now, like I said, we're through with halftime. The British have come up with something called the Southern Strategy. There is stalemate up north with Washington and Clinton. And so they go south because they've been told there's lots of loyalists in the southern colonies. All they need to do is have the British Army show up, the loyalists will flock to the flag, and they will be able to roll up Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, and catch Washington between Cornwallis from the south and Clinton from the north and crush the revolution. their idea works at first. December of 1779, Savannah falls. May of 1780, Charleston surrenders after a siege. After that siege, Cornwallis dispatches Banastre Tarleton to capture the president of South Carolina, and he encounters a Continental unit from Virginia under Abraham Buford in a place called the Waxhaws. And this is the flag that is flying over those Continental troops as Tarleton and his men commit what is popularly known as the Buford Massacre. Now, this flag has a beaver on it with the word perservando. Beavers in heraldry are known for their perseverance in chewing at logs and building dams. Thus, you have the beaver and perservando. Now, apparently, this is a very bad representation of an English oak, but that's what it is, not a palmetto. But the word gets out. The British are not honoring their parole. They have massacred Americans who were surrendering. Great propaganda, by the way. Cornwallis starts to understand that he's going to have a tougher fight than he has. He thought he was going to. He sets up camp in Charlottetown, North Carolina. And in his dispatch, he describes the backcountry of the Carolinas as a hornet's nest. Well, the people in Charlotte love that description. And this is their flag. May 20, 1775. The Mecklenburg Resolves, one of the first declarations of independence in the states, in the colonies. That's why on North Carolina items, you'll see both May 20th and April 19th, because that's when they passed the Halifax Resolves in April. Two different declarations of independence within the colony of North Carolina. Well, during all this time, the Americans had lost an army of over 5,000 in Charlotte in May. Horatio Gates is sent south with a new army. He blunders into Cornwallis at Camden in August of 1780, another disaster for the Americans. Nathaniel Greene, remember I said that there was that guy from Rhode Island that had a bum leg? That's Nathaniel Greene. He was a private at the start, he's now a major general. He comes south to take command of what's left of the American army in the south. He realizes that the land cannot support a large army. So he does the unconscionable. In the face of a superior enemy, he divides his force in half, sending half west under Daniel Morgan to spirit up the backcountry. Not to be outdone, Cornwallis splits his army into three. He sends one part of his army east under Banastre Tarleton to confront Francis Marion in the PD of South Carolina. Cornwallis stays in the central. And on the west, Patrick Ferguson, the inspector of militia, is to generate a new militia army to protect Cornwallis' left flank. Ferguson, he's Scots, but he's not quite bright enough, because he sends a message across the mountains telling the Over-Mountain men that if you do not desist and return to the British flag, I shall send my army over the mountains to kill your leaders, burn your crops, and lay waste and destitute your families. Well, he should have known. Scotch Irish don't take kindly to those types of words. The Over-Mountain men march over the mountains, totally annihilating Ferguson's army at King's Mountain. 1/3 of the British army in the south is gone. Cornwallis recalls Tarleton from the east and sends him after Morgan, saying, you must take care of Morgan. On January 17th, 1781, 3 months after King's Mountain, Tarleton and Morgan face off at the Cowpens. Now, in the definition of the flag, is there anything that says which state is which flag? I mean, which star is which state? Well, I'll tell you what. The core of Morgan's army was Continentals from Maryland. I'll give you one guess That's the Witches, Maryland, on this flag. But this is the flag that is flying over Cowpens as Morgan executes a double envelopment, completely surrounding Charles's army and destroying another third of Cornwallis's force in the south. Cornwallis knows that the best thing he can do is try and recapture his men, because that's the flower of his army. He had sent his best troops under Tarleton, and he's lost them. It's better to go and recapture them than wait 3 or 4 months for reinforcements. As they race across North Carolina to the Virginia border, Cornwallis is forced to burn his baggage and run his men ragged, literally, trying to capture his soldiers. He never does. He realizes once Greene gets away into Virginia that he needs to go back toward the coast to reinforce his army, resupply. Greene, on the other hand, realizes he's got a better opportunity now than he ever had. The hunted is now the hunter. And on March 15th, 1781, Greene and Cornwallis meet at Guilford Courthouse outside of present-day Greensboro, North Carolina. Now that day, the main flag that's flying over the army is not an American flag, but it is actually the flag of North Carolina. A riff on the definition of the American flag. But this battle is basically a draw. Cornwallis claims victory because, according to the rules of war, after a battle, if your army is still on the field, you win. This is after he is forced to fire grape shot into the morass of American and British soldiers. That day, Cornwallis wins, but loses 25% of his army. Charles Fox, a member of Parliament, upon hearing the news of this victory, says, "Another such victory as this shall completely decimate the British army." And he's not wrong. In 6 months, Cornwallis has lost effectively 70% of what he started with. He decides, we've won. I've conquered the Carolinas. Let's go to Virginia next. He gets to a little place called York and sends a message which basically says, "Help!" He asks for relief, reinforcement, and British Navy assets. The British Navy sails south, and unfortunately at the same time, Washington and Rochambeau have stolen a march on Clinton, and they are now around York. Cornwallis is caught. The French Navy shows up, and of all things, they finally win a battle. The French Navy had a perfect record until they get to the Capes of the Chesapeake in September of 1781, when they finally win a battle. They drive the British Navy off, and now Cornwallis has nowhere to go. After that siege, Cornwallis is forced, in one of the great ironies of history, the British Army commander surrenders the flag of the Navy. That's usually the laugh line. Army surrenders Navy's flag. Anyway. Good news, we're almost done. According to history books, after Yorktown, the revolution's over. But not quite. They're still fighting. As a matter of fact, the last land engagement in North America is in November of 1782, 13 months after Yorktown. The Paris Peace Treaty is not signed until April 1784. As a matter of fact, the last credited Battle of the Revolution is not until 1786, when Britain and France face off on a field in India. News travels very slow. But if you look at a map, the American Revolution can be called the First World War because there are battles that are fought in North America, South America, present-day South Africa, British Isles, India, and what is now Vietnam. It's a global conflict. Now, With the Treaty of Paris, we have our independence. We have a government. It's not a very good government. It's so bad that eventually Washington and other founding fathers decide to have a convention in Philadelphia to draft a new form of government. We get our U.S. Constitution. And it's in April 1789 that George Washington steps out on the balcony of Federal Hall in New York under this: the first official flag of the United States of America. We know it's official because Congress paid for it. We have the receipts. 13 stars, 13 stripes, one for each of the colonies. Now I can continue to tell you stories about a 15-star, 15-stripe flag that flies over a small fort in Baltimore one night. I can tell you about a 28-star flag where the 28 individual stars are arrayed as one giant star because the president does not believe that this country can be torn asunder. I can talk about a 48-star flag that was raised over a small volcanic island in the Pacific. But the one that we're most used to seeing these days is one that I saw raised on the moon as a wee lad. 50 stars and 13 stripes, the flag of the United States of America. I tell these stories to not only educate about history, but to inspire others to learn. Whether we have 50 stars or even 57 at some point in the future, this is the flag of the United States of America, and that's the story of the American Revolution.